Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Burn. I'm your host, Eric Miller. Today I'm joined by an awesome advocate, a board member of an organization called Our Santa Fe River. And we'll talk about what that is and what they're doing and their fight and how we can help and so forth. It's Merrillee Malwitz-Jipson. How you doing, Merrillee?
I'm good, Eric. Thanks for having me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for taking some time to talk with me. As the election cycle was kind of winding down, I was thinking about, what other guests I can have on because I'm having candidates on mainly, but I also I found a platform where a lot of ecological environmental activists signed on for Our Climate President, and that's how I found Our Santa Fe River. And I went to your site, and it's a struggle that's local to your river, but it's also happening in a lot of rivers, right? So I wanted to have you on and talk about what you're doing and so forth. And before we get to like the evil Nestle company and all that kind of stuff, right, I want to ask just a few definitional questions just to set a little bit of a framework and stuff. So the first question is just what's the origin and mission of Our Santa Fe River?
Well, so it started out, believe it or not, against water bottling. But ultimately, the mission is to preserve and protect the Santa Fe River with education in mind. And so most of the work that we do, we consider it education, while some people might consider it political. We try to explain to uh, mostly government entities what's important to the Santa Fe River and why maybe a development project or a water use project or uh, uh, something that might load nutrients into the river might be bad for the river. And
Hmm.
so we use government meetings as a platform to educate.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, and like I said, that's a frontline issue in a lot of communities, right? So I'm glad you're doing that. And I'm going to pull up your website in a moment, and there's a map on there. I'll try to click to that, but this isn't. We're talking about Central Florida, essentially, right?
North Central Florida, in particular, we're closer to Georgia than most of Floridians in Florida, and so we're a North Central freshwater spring-fed river.
Okay, great. And again, just in the interest of definitional things, there was a white paper on your site that talks about water quantity and water quality, which is what largely your advocacy is around. And can you just define what those means for laymen, and how are they measured and how are they trending in your river specifically?
Yeah, so water quality and quantity in our particular region of Florida are intrinsically tied because of the Floridan aquifer and because we're a recharge system for that Floridan freshwater system. So whatever, the easiest way to talk about that is whatever goes on the land in our region, for the most part, ends up in the water supply. And so if people are fertilizing or manure is being laid or septic tanks or spray fields in municipality treatment centers aren't working, the nutrient loading actually infiltrates through the sand, through the sediment, runs off in clay body in the soil that might be clay and ends up in the sand sediment and then infiltrates into the drinking water supply and also the spring water supply. And so the Floridan actually, the springs on the Santa Fe River are the discharges of that pressure system in the Floridan in the Floridan aquifer itself. And so the pressure is so great that it pumps water out at these springs on the Santa Fe River. So whatever's going on the land, we can pretty much guarantee it's going to be in not only our drinking water supply, but also in the freshwater systems of the springs.
Right on. And how is that measured? How has it been trending? Your organization has been around for about 10 years, right?
Actually, since 2006, a little
Okay.
more than 10, and it's trending downward in terms of nutrient loading. We're having worse problems with more chemicals or more nitrates, nitrogen loading into our water systems. And then as far as water quantity goes, the Floridan, when we first started, we found out through all kinds of research testimony, whatever, through the scientists that we're 20 feet below whatever they deemed as relatively normal. It's hard to quantify what normal is because they've only been tracking the water levels in the aquifer since the 1930s, 40s. So prior to that, they had no method of knowing. I like I like to talk about walking river systems and looking at the marks on the trees and say, hey, that tells you how much water should be in the system. But a lot of the scientists don't agree with me on that one. They'd rather have hard science of some sort of data collection point that they map on a graph. So because they do know that it's 20 feet below normal, whatever normal means,
Right.
that we need to actually reduce the amount of pumping that we're doing right now. And that doesn't just mean the water bottle story that we're going to talk about today. That means across the board. That means in people's homes and people's businesses. That means in farming. Farming has to figure out a way to grow differently where they don't need so much water, where they can use less water on their crops. Do soil amendments, do soil remediation where the water is maintained more in the soil itself and not running off or not infiltrating. And there's been a tremendous amount of work in the past, I want to say 10 years, that we've been engaged with, our Santa Fe River's been engaged with through various protests or, like I said, using this educational platform that we use often to go to government meetings and say, hey, this land use is bad and this is why. And because of that, I think really good work of a citizens-based organization. None of our members, rather, not members, none of our staff, board members, really, they're not even staff, get paid. We're a completely volunteer organization, which is really unusual based on what I know about other organizations that are not-for-profits. You usually have at least one director or somebody, office staff person that's getting paid. That's not the case in our situation. So you were talking about our website. Our webmaster gets paid because she is a genius. And you'll see why, because that website is our connection to everything.
Yeah, so let's so it's oursantaferiver.org, and I'll click through a little bit. But one thing you said I wanted to follow up a question on. So that from the educational perspective, you mentioned about better utilization of water in farming. That would be an educational opportunity at a legislative level. Has there been efforts to incentivize farmers to do that?
Yeah, I think one of the best incentivized programs that the farmers have today are soil moisture probes. These are very long, long industrial type of toothpicks, in a sense, that stick in the ground and can tell the farmer exactly how much moisture is at what level of the dirt in where their root ball is, where their root mass is.
Right.
And those are incredible. They're quite pricey, and so there are incentives to supplement what a farmer might have to pay to have a soil moisture probe sensor put in his ground.
Right.
And those are extraordinary. They're using less. So in my experience, when I go out to the farms and the test sites, they tell me, the researchers tell me, that the farmers are definitely using less water because of those sensors. Because here's the thing. In the 1970s, the government subsidized irrigation systems.
Right.
And if you look at a graph in Florida and you can chart how high or low the water levels are in the aquifer or in the springs or whatever thing that you're looking at to show flow and to show output and to show how much water is in the natural systems. It's almost like in the 1970s, you can see a sharp, steep decline. And that's when government said, hey, we're in this big, massive drought across the country, and we're going to start supplementing farmers to put irrigation systems in instead of these ditching and draining systems that they were utilizing off ponding or off lakes or off waterways, but that they could spread that water out, which is a very traditional old way of doing things. Right. And so then they started putting in these massive wells, and they would use and they still use them today, of course, these pivot sprinklers that are pumping the water out, millions upon millions, more than any bottled water permit ever, onto their ground, and they would saturate the ground so much that it would start to run off. And so these soil moisture probes allow them to see where it infiltrates, and then there's a mechanism in place that turns off that irrigation system, which is great.
Right. So let's let's get to the website. You mentioned it's awesome. So again, like you said, no one's paid the organization, so it's, donations go a long way, right? It goes directly to the activism that you guys are doing and so forth. So it's oursantaferiver.org. You also have a Twitter, you have a Facebook, where you're probably most active. So, go like them on Facebook, share this video, invite your friends. And, the things we're talking about, we're talking about this local river, this river in Florida, but, these are applicable to other areas of the country. And I want to, you shared a story about the Lakota having similar issues and so forth, right? But, let's just kind of look at the website real quick. One of the things I wanted to show was just a map real quick, right? Just to get a sense of where we're talking about. And there's also a lot of beautiful pictures on here too, which is great, right? So, so this is the map of the river we're talking about. There's a lot of variations of it and so forth. So come here. There's a lot of resources, and you can learn more. And like I said, make a donation. There's videos. There's all kinds of news and blogs. So go check out oursantaferiver.org. One of the things I wanted to focus on is the water bottling. You mentioned it, at the top. And I saw a recent story where, I don't want to spoil it, but you had 19,000 people wrote, sort of in protest. And I think it was successful. Can you talk about that effort and what they were, writing about, and who were the recipients, and what the effectiveness was?
Yeah, so in Florida, to achieve or to secure a water use permit, you have to go online with the government agency. In our particular situation, it's the Swanee River Water Management District agency. And there's a place online that says if you object or if you support this water use permit, you can make a comment. And so I knew that. And so I broadcast that that portal, that connection to the portal, every which way I could for several months. And we did achieve 19,000 comments plus on that particular portal. And the cool thing about that is you can't necessarily do it anonymously. So to have that many people actually give up their somewhat personal identity, because these petition online sites today, so many of them are anonymous. People don't want to give up their personal identities. They're whatever, they're afraid of whatever. In this particular situation, people let the water management district know who they were, and that's saying a lot, because it's public information, it's on public record, and that's just telling the water managers that there are that many people who care about the water. I'm not saying all 19,000 plus comments were against issuing the water use permit. It's really interesting. But if you start to read them, which we did, we had a team of people reading them, because here's the other goofy thing about all that. We thought the water managers would create a team at their office and be reading these daily. We thought that they would be hearing what the public had to say. We only found out later that these are not getting read. So that kind of sucks. But that's another story altogether, because we are still trying to pressure them, to the board members or somebody, to read them. Like I said, we had a team together. We read over 2,000 of them. Wow. And in a short amount of time. We would still like to read all of them and categorize them. In Michigan, they had a water bottle problem with Nestle too. And they did read them, and their agency up there in Michigan, they actually categorized each of the comments in one way or another so that they were classified. We wanted that to happen here. We're not done yet. We're still hopeful that that's going to happen, because those people had the spirited sense to write in, and they matter. And I never want it to be a situation where we did ask and then somehow they felt like they didn't matter. But I tell you what, the numbers on that mattered. And then there was probably, with our 2,000 count, probably about 1% was in favor of it, which really it didn't hardly amount to anything compared to the massive amount of people that were against it. And then you had the occasional people that would say, they would click the box supportive, and of course you'd read the comment, and then they were against it. So you really had to, we wanted the water managers to understand you had to open that up and really look at that to understand what people really wanted you to hear. And so
Right.
today, yesterday, we started a postcard campaign because we
Right.
figured, okay, if that's so hard to read online, which should have been easy, we're going to just mail you cards. And we're going to have the postcard is great because then not only do they have to read them because they're easy to read, you can just basically flip it back and forth. I got one
Right.
here.
Right.
Flip it. I don't know where I am. There I am. And then you flip it around, and then you got the pretty picture of a spring or whatever. And
Amazing.
so that way, not only are the board members going to have a chance to read them, but anybody who's standing at the front desk
Right.
when these things come in that are staff members, they're going to be like, wow, we're getting a lot of mail lately, because I don't think they've ever had that experience either. They never had this many comments ever. We have a toll road going in the state of Florida, one of the biggest massive projects in the state of Florida that ever is taking form or function. And there's a lot of protesting. And that protest, lots of groups are involved, lots of organizations. They got over 13,000 comments.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, for a toll road, they got over 13,000 comments. For a bottled water permit, one bottled water permit worth 1 million gallons of our spring water coming out of Ginny Springs got over 19,000 comments.
That's amazing.
A lot. That's extraordinary.
Yeah, that's really great, and that's inspirational, right? That gives you hope. Let me ask a little bit. So it's Nestle. It's the local water company that's selling it to Nestle. It's public water, and they're selling it to a private company. Is that it in a nutshell?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It gets nuttier than that. It's a land. Well, it's not even a landholder. It's a shell of a company. It's a shell. They don't own any land. They don't own the wells. They don't own the pipeline. They don't own the plant. And they created a shell of a company back in the 1990s called Seven Springs Water Company. Now, that company back then in the 90s, the family members of the land where the wells are and where the pipelines are, a particular family member helped create that company. So because it's familial, or because it's a family situation, and frankly, it's kind of because they were somewhat wealthy and powerful, they were given kind of a free ride in a sense, where nobody really investigated them too hard. Well, we did. We did. We looked at every legal document. There were hundreds. Every circuit court document, every property deed, every description, all thousands of acres of land. And it turns out Seven Springs Water Company owns nothing in this water use permit situation. So because of that, there is an administrative hearing going on right now. Our Santa Fe River, we tried to get into an administrative hearing with this staff decision roughly, or the board decision. The board decision was going to decide sometime this summer, and we found out that they were going to be in favor of it, the board. And that's when we tried to get into this administrative hearing process. Already, Seven Springs Water Company and the Nestle attorneys were already engaged with the staff members of the Water Management District, because the staff members were going to deny the permit. Yay, they were going to deny it. And so turns out, in the long and the short of this particular administrative hearing, Nestle has very deep pockets. They have very seasoned and lots of attorneys. And the Water Management District has two attorneys, and they are fighting an uphill battle trying to deny the permit. The Water Management District, still through this administrative process wants to deny the permit. So the ultimate question out of this situation, although the judge has not ruled yet, we're still waiting on pins and needles for the judge to rule, but the proposed recommended orders by the two sides, by the Nestle attorneys representing Seven Springs Water Company, and by the Water Management District attorneys representing these two guys representing the district. The question is control. So to get a water use permit in Florida, you have to have real estate. You have to have property ownership. You have to have control of the land or some use of the water.
Right.
So they're going to be deciding on how does Seven Springs Water Company have control. Here's why. So we have droughts. Santa Fe River had a terrible drought in 2012. And when you have droughts, technically that permit, that water pumping needs to go off at a certain point when the water levels get so low.
Right.
So if that is the case, if Seven Springs does not have clear ownership and clear control, who's going to turn those pumps off? If Nestle has no ownership or control of the pumps themselves, which they don't, who's the one going to be responsible for that permit? So I mean, these are really,
And there's they have no motivation to do so, right? It would be an interruption of their business, right?
no, they don't. And the reality is, the things that we're describing, they might have an easy remedy. But our Santa Fe River wanted to fight in our administrative hearing. We wanted to fight the science. We wanted to fight the public interest because it matters in the state of Florida. It's part of our legal construct of whether or not you issue a permit. And we wanted to fight whether it was reasonable or beneficial.
Right.
We didn't get our day in court. We spent thousands and thousands of dollars on our attorneys trying to fight to get our day in court. And eventually we just got so boxed in and so much money was being spent, it just wasn't worth it. So after the judge issues his recommended order based on what he knows of this case, it may have to go back to the drawing board. It may have to be a situation where Seven Springs and the owner of these things I talked about, the wells and the pipeline and the land, she might have to come in and be the one on the application. And when that happens, it's a whole new application party. Woohoo! We get to have another DOA, hopefully, or another administrative hearing, because that's how it works. We should get our day in court then. And then hopefully bring in all of these testimony, all of this, a massive amount of testimony that we wanted to have during a court case, if we could get our court case, and hopefully that's when we bring that in. In the meantime, we're going to pressure that board to deny the permit the way that it should be denied, because Seven Springs doesn't own Italy. And why are you going to give them a permit? Right. We're going to be making millions of dollars on this permit. Y'all, it's mind-boggling what they make on this permit application. I mean, it's in the 90s, it would have been between 50 and 60 million dollars a year.
Wow.
And so it's a lot of money. And Nestle, on the other hand, God only knows how many billions of dollars they'll be making off the water, because if that's what they're paying this little piddly well and pipeline situation, who knows what they're making on a, what is it, a 12 or an 8, 16.9 ounces of spring water. And then what do you do with this? You dump it on the side of the road, or it rolls around off your boat or off your car, or while you're walking or running down the road or on a sidewalk or whatever. And then we're picking it up, because we have all these cleanup things too that we do to kind of keep the pollution out of the springs and out of the rivers. Tons of cleanups. And what are we picking up all the time? Bottled water from Zephyrhills. There. I can't even get it on the screen there. Dyslexic. Anyway, so don't buy that stuff. Stop buying bottled water. Any kind of bottled water. Yeah, use these. There. Use a reusable bottle. Filter it. Exactly. I don't here's, I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox right now. Here's the thing. It's a scam perpetuated on the public.
Right.
And what I've learned in the last year, because of COVID, so many horrible things have happened with COVID, but also some good things. Learning about consumption, learning about consumerism, what really has value, what do you really need? You need a good filter at your tap water. You need to be able to filter your own tap water, because this stuff is not sustainable. Right. This is completely sustainable. And we need to make municipalities, cities, better, like they're doing now in Flint, Michigan, and I don't know why they're not drinking the water, but they're afraid of it, I suppose, and I understand that completely. But we need to make city water so that it's good for you and not sickly and dangerous for you.
Here,
And
here. Yeah,
the
definitely.
biggest myth we have right now is that when we support plastic bottled water consumption of any sort, the less likely the municipality, the cities, the governments are going to fix your water supply coming into your tap water.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I'm glad you. I was going to ask about how Nestle had standing in that case, and you described it as control. And you mentioned the postcard campaign, and you're just kicking that off, so it's not on the website yet. But go to our SantaFeRiver.org, go to their Facebook page. That's where Merrillee's going to be posting that, and you can send postcards from anywhere, right? Uh,
That's right.
yeah,
Anywhere.
the one thing I also wanted to give you an opportunity to speak on, and you don't have to go, too in depth on each of these, but this is, a really great delineation of current threats on our river. And again, these are applicable to any our river basically around the country, right? So, just kind of in a nutshell, we talked about bottled water. Can you talk about the other five and what those frontline issues look like, on the Santa Fe River?
Right. So of course. So I'll go into the pipeline. Sable Trail gas transmission pipeline. We fought that for 4 years. Got involved with some legal situations with Sierra Club. They actually won that court case having to do with greenhouse gas emissions associated with building pipelines. That pipeline cut clear through the Santa Fe River, underneath it, but underneath it nonetheless. Cut through miles, 500 and almost 600 miles of easeway for that particular utility. And natural gas is it's not a bridge fuel. It's something that is really detrimental for the planet. I think we're all very aware of that. Even down to the products that are necessary or that need natural gas to exist, like plastic bottled water. um, and so, yeah, we learned a lot about all kinds of things in that respect. And so now we're applying a lot of that work to the toll road project because it's a similar thing, even though it's a little bit wider. It'll have the same detrimental impact, and not only to the wildlife, but to the habitat of taking out a forest, an old growth forest, taking out a canopy, removing any trees that are kind of keystone in a sense, where they have a lot of species that require them require trees, large trees, to exist. It's bad to remove them. It's bad to destroy any habitat on the whole planet these days because humans have done such a number on the planet.
Yeah.
So those
Not to
corridors
mention, yeah, not to mention leaks in the
infrastructure are
pipeline
just
phase, right?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, what?
Not to mention leaks, any leaks, the risk of leaks with a pipe in the case of a pipeline, right?
Not only
Um,
are there leaks, but they're planned leaks. They have these situations where they build up so much pressure in those pipelines that they have to unscrew the valve and release the gas. It's
hmm.
the craziest thing, and it's like a airplane going off in your back neighborhood. Like, I get phone calls like, "What is that noise?" And they're releasing the gas into the atmosphere because it's too much pressure in the pipeline, or they've got to repair something in the pipeline. And
Yeah.
and you know the pipelines, that is all about bringing natural gas to at this point in time in Florida, because it's really not that necessary in Florida. We didn't think it was to start with, and we really questioned who was going to be utilizing this gas. But now they are talking about LNG, liquid natural gas exportation at the ports along Florida, because Florida has a lot of ports. We're primarily a riverfront. We're peninsula, so we always knew it was going to be used for LNG, and that's all about becoming a superpower for natural gas in the world. And the United States, they were on that bent for a long time. Things are really changing with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So I'm not sure where natural gas pipelines are going to be in the next 5 or 10 years. They'll probably be they'll probably be, what's the word, like a no longer viable. And then the other one, factory chicken farms, or factory farming in itself. Really bad for the health of humans. Regenerative farming is the approach that we would love farmers to be taking more. Farming, tiered structure farming, where you have multiple things going on simultaneously on your farm. Anything where you have monoculture, which is basically what factory farming is. It just causes all kinds of havoc on not only human health, but the animals' health that are living in these conditions. So we found out that there's a lot of chicken factory farming going on in Florida, and one of them they put right next to a spring, and we fought that one so we thought we were going to win. We lost, and so now they have this big, massive chicken farm. It's just horrible, right in a spring community where tourism is taking place, and people are like, "What is that thing? Why is there a chicken farm here?" And it stinks, and there's ammonia in the air, and it smells, and every once in a while the wind blows a certain way and you can smell it or whatever. These farms imagine 20 years. What?
I imagine there's also like these last two here, the mining and the factory farming. One of the big components, you're talking about the usage, right, not being efficient and regulated to the proper degree and so forth. But I'm assuming on the back end, pollution and runoff is insane on both factory farming and mining.
Yep, with and couple that or quadruple that with air quality. So when you have ammonia going out into the air and you've got rain or you've got conditions where it brings it back down onto the ground, it's not just what's falling on the ground at that point in time, it's the release of whatever's in the atmosphere. Right. And that also impacts the quality of the water, impacts the whatever's landing on the ground. Phosphate mining, big problem. It's such a big one. So we fought that one. We're still fighting that one 5 years now. So far, I would like to say that we're successful, that they are not phosphate mining in Union and Bradford County directly on top of the new river that's a tributary to the Santa Fe River. It's still being decided in courts. It's still being decided at the government level. We have one county, Union County, that's absolutely adamantly against it. And they've done such a good job, this government entity, this government, 5 members of their board have put their foot down and said, no way, we're not going to have it in our community.
Excellent.
The neighboring community of Bradford County, on the other hand, is 180 degrees opposite of this county and says, well, can't be that bad. So the fight goes on, and all I can say is that it has not happened. There's a great video about it, a 19-minute video that a filmmaker came from California, from Berkeley, and I think it's on our website, to do a documentary about that particular issue, that phosphate mining of HPS2, that's the name of the company. And so, yeah, that's out there somewhere. Good film.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put the link in the comments when I find it. Just a couple more things. I mean, I could talk to you about any of these issues at length. I love your enthusiasm and your, passion about these things as is needed, right? So, just a couple things and kind of political, right? So, what's in the Trump era, there were a lot of deregulation steps put into place, right? What was the most egregious one that had a direct impact on the fight you're fighting?
Well, it just happened last week. The federal government gave the 404 dredge and fill permits. Any time you want to mess with a wetland, you're required a dredge and fill permit, and they gave that 404 permit to Florida. So now Florida, in their infinite wisdom, thinks that they can handle dredging and filling permits and do a good job. But they haven't done a good job ever. We have all kinds of problems with development around here. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the problems we have with their springs and rivers, kind of like canaries in the coal mine in a sense. So yeah, that's the worst one. And now there's a huge, massive lawsuit campaign. Earth Justice is getting involved with that one too. The Center for Biological Diversity is involved with that, and I'm hoping that we can get that one back. I think there's only 2 other states in the nation that actually their state controls their 404 permitting situation. And Florida, of all states, I mean, we're mostly wetlands. And so the developers and business type of entities are drooling over the fact that Florida will control this and not the federal government, because they were long and lengthy and very time consuming and expensive to get a 404 permit. Not
Which
to
is
say
fine.
that, but
That's
they
how
were
it,
all people
that's how
like
it
us.
should be, right? That's how it should be, right?
It should
So,
be. It
yeah.
should be very well vetted, and everybody should be engaged with it. And I'm terrified to see what happens when Florida has control of this.
Yeah, that actually ties into my next question then. So, you mentioned earlier Nestle has deep pockets, right? Which is code, not only does that mean attorneys and, they have these cases, based on attrition and so forth, but, they also, they bribe legislators, right? And I know that's an issue on the coast for big sugar in Florida, right? Is that an issue in terms of like, donations? I call them, they're bribes, right? Is it, is Nestle buying legislators, or, you feel free to not say it as directly as I am, but, is their money influencing, the board, or, anyone that has any legislative power over their fate?
I only know that I don't know any of that specifically directly. I hear a lot of people talking about that.
Right.
I have not, like, there's nothing I could think of that would, that, yeah, oh yeah, Nestle did this. Now Nestle gives $70,000 or $75,000 a year to the water management district for data collection on the Withlacoochee River, and the Withlacoochee River is ripe with all kinds of problems because of Valdosta upstream. They dump nutrients in their wastewater system doesn't work properly. It is now, but it wasn't over the years, and sometimes doesn't even today. So they were giving the water management district $70,000 for that work. Now they would have had to have done the work themselves. So I guess given 70,000 to that entity versus doing it themselves, I don't know. And
Right.
then they did. Nestle put a Christmas ornament on the Christmas tree downtown High Springs. That really pissed off a lot of people. Like, wow, get them out of there. I don't know if the ornament ever came down. Everybody's too nice around here to do anything about that.
Right.
But I don't, I've heard, giving away water during hurricane, problems. I've heard Nestle, but what are you going to do? You can't complain about that. So,
Right.
so I don't have the sense that at least, I'll tell you this. I've been to Tallahassee. I see what goes on in Tallahassee. Their attorneys are definitely in the same room when legislative water laws are being written. So
Right.
watching these people be in that room sickens me, because I know all they're doing is taking it all in and then going and having a private meeting. Doesn't necessarily it means money's transferring, but they're
Right.
going in to talk to somebody about their issues. And
Yeah.
with that said, there is no tax in Florida on bottled water. So you can buy certain food things and get taxed. Not really food necessarily, because that's not tax either. But you can buy certain things in Florida and there will be a tax on them that's consumable products. But water's not taxed. And I think, as much as I hate to think, well, if we tax it, then that means it will allow bottled water to exist. And that's not what it's going to mean.
Yeah, that's
There
not
are
the solution.
plenty of water bottle permits already ongoing in the state of Florida right now that take trillions of water out of our water resources and puts them into plastic bottles. And it should be taxed. And it doesn't mean it's going to hurt the people that have poverty, that don't have a lot of money, or that can't afford bottled water. Most of those people aren't drinking bottled water anyway. And if they've got problems with their water supplies, what I'd love to see that tax go to is fixing these water supplies, these municipality water supplies that I was talking about before.
Right.
The bills that are in the that are being kind of debated right now. There's another bill that just got I think Senator Tadeo, I think that's who it was, just filed another bill that had to do with the water that comes out of the tax fixing wastewater systems. Not quite what I had in mind, but wastewater, yeah, there's a quality problem with water, and so yeah, maybe that'll have some sort of trickle down effect. But I really want to see the infrastructure reinforced. Fort White, where I live, Fort White residents can't drink their water. Really bad. Brantford, right up the road from Fort White, they can't drink their water. Sometimes they have boil water notices. High Springs, nice place. That's where all the springs are, right? Sometimes they can't drink their water. So we have water problems where Nestle wants to move in already. You know, they want to come and take our water when we can't even drink the water coming out of our taps within a 20-mile radius around where this extraction thing's going to happen. So that's where I want to see these tax. If you're gonna tax, although stop this permit first. Stop this permit at Jinky Springs first. And if you're going to tax, then it should go to infrastructure. It should go to make it so that people can drink safe water out of their tap. I don't care if it means reverse osmosis on everybody's tap that has problems, or if it's some other sort of filtration system that's on the larger system itself. But the idea that people can't drink their water, or here's the other weird thing. People think people think their water is bad, but the reality is that water is so tested daily. I just can't understand why people think that their city water is worse than bottled water.
Well, propaganda, you know the reason why, right? You know the reason. They're trying to sell bottled water. That's the reason why, right? It's pretty
yeah.
evident.
You think all of our research now, people are smart enough to do their reading, to do their homework, and they should find their test results, and they should be able to say, hey, my water's okay. And I know there's chlorine in the water. I mean, I don't like the taste of chlorine either, but there are filtration systems that do remove that. Or even leaving it overnight, and it's a gas, it dissipates, the Brita or whatever. So,
sorry, that goes back to Evian being naive spelled backwards, right? That's what that goes back to that, right? Well, yeah, I mean, Merrillee, I could talk to you all day. I'm being mindful of time and so forth. The couple of things, and please come back anytime, right? Particularly when there's updates in your struggles and so forth. So it's oursantaferiver.org. You mentioned there's the postcard writing campaign that you're going to be posting on Facebook. Go find them on Facebook, go like their page, share their information, send some postcards, right? You don't have to be, on the Santa Fe River to participate in this, right? This affects us all, right?
Right.
So any other ways, you talk about stop using bottled water and so forth, any other concrete ways that people can help your organization in your frontline battles?
I think just getting involved with any of the organizations that they resonate with in their own communities, because the grassroots, people talk about grassroots kind of like a catch-all for everything, but really it's your community, and getting involved, you can't necessarily do that. You can get involved because of COVID. So many opportunities now exist to actually attend these government meetings without actually going to them.
Right.
That's fantastic, because sometimes I was telling my husband the other day, I went and participated in a meeting that I saved 2 hours of my day because I didn't have to drive there and back. And I mean, I would do this meeting every month that way, and the amount of time I spend driving, because I live in the country. So I think get involved. It definitely works. But sitting around and waiting for somebody else to do everything, that only lasts for so long, because we all get really tired after a while and have to go back to our families. But
that point too, and the profit motive is never going to cease, right? To pardon the bad pun, but it's like running water. Like, it's always going to find a way, right? So, even if you stave off Nestle here and there and the water company, right, there's always the next battle, right? We always need Merrillees, and we need to be on these front lines fighting these fights. And you can take a break and do some self-care and so forth, but if we're not fighting these fights in your community, and our Santa Fe River, our whatever river in your community, they're ultimately going to win, right? So we need to keep staving them off, right? It's capitalism. That's a larger conversation, right? But I admire the work that you're doing, and I'm glad I got to speak with you about it. And hopefully, like I said, please come back when you have updates. And the website is oursantaferiver.com or .org rather. Go make a donation. sign up to write some postcards, just even sign on their mailing lists, right? There's news on the site. There's always, things to follow, white papers and so forth, and just stay engaged, right? And, just as a weird aside, this week, I had other guests booked and so forth, but the last 2 weeks have been just effing crazy in the news. And, I didn't want to talk about an insurrection. I wanted to talk about good old fashioned corporate overreach in water, right? So I'm glad I got an opportunity to talk about kind of a more, less authoritarian issue or whatever.
It's a change. I mean, this week has been an incredibly strange time.
Yeah,
so,
here. So again, it's our SantaFeRiver.org. Merrillee, please come back. Let me know, as your campaigns are progressing, and you have a platform here anytime. As I mentioned, you're on the board, so if anyone else from your organization wants to come on, feel free to pass me along and so forth. And keep doing the work you're doing. It's vital, literally.
Yeah, we've got a new board member. I'll share just briefly. He's a Trail Trash. That's the name of his group. He's got his own group called Trail Trash Outdoors. Trail Trash Outdoors. And it's all about cleaning up.
Nice.
I don't know what happened in this world where we think it's okay to either drive by or walk by litter that's underneath our feet. I have found myself so often in like even in the parking lot at the grocery store, bending over to pick up whatever's at my feet. And people just, they walk over that like it doesn't exist somehow. So, yeah, Trav is our newest board member, and I would love to see more effort put out to clean up your spaces. It doesn't take much. I mean, it's just a little, either a grabber if you're not comfortable picking up, or something just to clean up your space and just to be aware. Because I think the more you beautify your space, the more you realize what's around you, then you really open your eyes to the other things. And if you can start to see the trash, then you can see the beauty in everything too. So, and I think again, COVID's changing everything. It's made people be outside more and more in touch with the outdoors, which is a lovely thing. And I would love to see more stories about how people clean up their environments, because it's your environment, and you got to last for the next generation.
Yep. And if not me, then who, right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Excellent. Yep. Well, like I said, keep fighting the good fight, and I appreciate what you do. And please come back and stay safe in this COVID world, and try to stay sane. And thank you for your time this evening.
Thanks, Eric. It was a pleasure to be with you. I appreciate that you let me kind of rant on a little bit.
Have at it. I love it. We're all friends here. The passion matters, right? Like that's what I try to. You're authentic. You care. That's important. Just do your thing. And like I said, we're all friends here in this fight. So, I thank you. I honor you, and I appreciate your work heretofore, like I said. So stay safe, and I will talk to you again soon, my friend.
Thanks, Eric. All right. Right on. Thank you.